I came home early to surprise my husband, but the voice behind the door told me the truth instead. My entire life shattered in a single second. I am Hateya Gentlerain, a landscape architect. I spend my days designing beautiful gardens for others, yet my own life has become a field of thorns. My sister, the person I trusted most, decided to prune me away for her own gain. The golden light of late afternoon filtered through the hallway of our home, painting the hardwood floor in stripes of warmth. I had left the firm early, clutching a bottle of champagne, eager to tell Mark the news about the new municipal commission. I hummed a melody, my heels clicking softly against the floorboards. As I neared our master bedroom, the sound of a woman's laughter drifted through the air, a sound so familiar it made my skin crawl. It was my sister, Clara. The door was slightly ajar, casting a sliver of darkness into the hallway. I pushed it open, expecting a casual afternoon chat. Instead, I saw my husband and my own sister entangled in a way that left no room for interpretation. They froze. Mark's eyes widened, his face flushing a deep, ugly crimson, but he didn't pull away immediately. Clara simply stared, her expression not one of shame, but of irritation that I had interrupted their moment. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating, ringing in my ears like a funeral bell. I saw the way his hand lingered on her arm, the way her hair was disheveled in a manner I had once reserved only for my own intimate moments with him. In that heartbeat, the image of my husband was erased and replaced by a hollow shell of a stranger. My stomach turned, a cold, sharp pain lancing through my chest as I realized this wasn't an accident. The familiarity of their movements, the casual way they looked at each other, it was a routine. It had been happening for months, right under my nose, in the sanctuary I had worked so hard to build. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the champagne bottle. I simply backed away, the air leaving my lungs as I turned and walked out the door, leaving my marriage, my home, and the girl I thought was my best friend in the dust. I found a room in a sterile, dimly lit hotel on the edge of the city. The walls were thin, and the hum of the air conditioner sounded like a constant, mocking heartbeat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. The scene played on a loop in my mind, a film reel I couldn't cut. My phone buzzed incessantly. Clara. Her messages flooded my screen, alternating between, "It was a mistake," and, "You were never really there, Hateya." The audacity stung more than the betrayal itself. She felt entitled to him, as if my life was something she could harvest. I logged into my banking apps, needing a distraction from the crushing weight of my own thoughts. My fingers hovered over the glass screen, and as I scrolled through my business account, the world tilted. Thousands of dollars were missing. My heart hammered against my ribs. These were funds for my current project, my legacy. I checked the transaction history. Transfers to anonymous accounts, strange vendor payments, fees for services I never authorized. My sister had access to my business portal, something I had granted her in a moment of naive trust when she started her own consulting firm. She hadn't just stolen my husband. She had been systematically draining my professional life, siphoning my success to fuel her own ambitions. I pulled out a notebook and a pen, the physical act of writing grounding me. I began to list every unauthorized charge, every date, every discrepancy. Each line I wrote was a spike driven into the coffin of our relationship. My tears had dried, replaced by a cold, relentless clarity that felt like fire in my veins. The next morning, I drove to my office, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I bypassed the receptionist and headed straight to my server room. My computer was locked, but I had the override codes. I started to dig, searching for the files related to the Oakwood project, my most prestigious contract. The screen flickered as I navigated through the directories. My breath hitched. The files were corrupted, the designs mangled, and in their place were documents drafted in my own name, yet bearing the signature of Clara's company. She hadn't just stolen money. She had been posing as me. She was submitting my blueprints to clients, acting as the lead architect, and collecting the commissions. I opened an email thread she had saved in the drafts folder, likely intending to delete it later. It was a correspondence with a rival firm, detailing a plan to systematically sabotage my reputation by feeding false data to my primary investors. Mark was looped into these emails, offering advice on how to bypass my oversight. The betrayal wasn't a sudden storm. It was an act of architectural demolition. They had been tearing down my life beam by beam while I was out there watering the gardens. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. I realized then that my tears were useless. They were a waste of moisture. Silence was no longer a language I would speak. I was done being the silent, suffering sister. I was going to be the architect of their ruin. I invited Clara to a quiet, upscale cafe on the outskirts of the city. I wore a simple dress and kept my hair pulled back, my face composed and neutral. When she arrived, she looked vibrant, wearing a scarf I had bought her for her birthday. She sat across from me, her eyes searching my face for the breakdown she expected. I gave her nothing. I poured my coffee, my hands steady. "I've had time to think," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I know about the funds. I know about the firm." Her smile wavered, then solidified into something harder. "You were always so busy with your plants, Hateya. You didn't notice the world moving on." She went on to describe how she had secured the Green Valley contract using my concepts, bragging about the praise she had received. She leaned in, her voice low, explaining how Mark had helped her reformat my technical specifications to suit her needs. I felt the hidden digital recorder in my pocket warming against my skin, capturing every admission, every arrogant detail. I let her talk, nodding occasionally, letting her believe that I was just a defeated, broken woman looking for a way to keep the peace. The bitterness in my chest was transforming. It wasn't the jagged, suffocating hurt anymore. It was turning into ice, cold, sharp, and incredibly precise. I finished my coffee, stood up, and looked at her. "I hope it was worth it," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. She laughed, a brittle sound that didn't reach her eyes. She had no idea that I had just signed her social and professional death warrant. I spent the next 2 days in my childhood home, a place I had avoided for years. The attic was filled with boxes of our history. I sifted through old journals, finding entries from when we were teenagers. Even then, there was a dark, pulsing current of envy in her writing, a resentment of my academic success, my talent for design, the way our parents had praised my creativity. She hadn't changed. She had simply grown more dangerous. I found a lockbox tucked under the floorboards in the closet. Inside were my identity documents, my passport, my social security card, my birth certificate, that had gone missing months ago. She hadn't just stolen my money and my husband. She had been preparing a life in my skin, ready to assume my credentials if she needed to. The scale of her deception was staggering. It wasn't just a betrayal of a sister. It was a total erasure of the person I was. I felt a strange, detached horror looking at these documents. I realized that my sister had been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment to hollow me out. I packed the journals and the documents into my bag. They would be exhibits, pieces of a life that would soon be reconstructed, but not in the image she wanted. I left the house, the floorboards groaning under my feet as if in mourning, and I didn't look back. The next week was a blur of calculated movement. I tracked down Arthur, a wealthy developer who had pulled his support from my firm 3 months ago. I requested a private meeting and laid out the facts. I didn't appeal to his sympathy. I appealed to his business interests. I showed him the timestamps, the stolen design files, and the evidence of the corrupted specifications that had nearly compromised his project. Arthur was a man who valued loyalty above all else, and the look of betrayal on his face when he saw how Clara had played him was worth more than gold. "She didn't just steal from me," I told him, my voice steady. "She compromised the structural integrity of your building to save costs." He was furious, the kind of furious that ruined careers. He became my strongest ally. I spent hours gathering the digital logs from our shared cloud drive, tracing every login and every transaction back to her IP address. Mark's involvement was just as deep. I found bank records proving he had been funneling our savings into a joint investment account with her. They were in this together, a parasitic unit that had been living off my lifeblood. I organized the evidence into a clean professional file. It was a map of their destruction, and it was ready. I watched them from a discreet table at the corner of a bistro they frequented. They were laughing, clinking glasses of wine, looking entirely comfortable in their stolen reality. They had no idea that the foundation they were standing on had already been hollowed out. I saw them toast, a gesture that made my pulse quicken. I felt no pity. Pity was for someone who had lost their way, not for someone who had deliberately stolen the map. My perspective had shifted. I was no longer a participant in their drama. I was an observer, a designer witnessing the inevitable collapse of